Ladies and gentlemen, may I request you to kindly settle down as we are starting today's proceedings. Thank you very much. Our guests who are standing at the back. Move forward. Assalamu alaikum. Hello. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammad Shahid Khan and I am Head of Business Development at ACCA Pakistan. On behalf of ACCA, I would like to formally welcome you all at this session on governance needs of SMEs. ACCA believes that those who own and or control businesses should accept responsibility for ensuring that they are governed in a way that inspires trust and confidence. ACCA believes that it is in the public interest to ensure the long-term success and prosperity of the SME community because of the importance they play in our economy. Therefore, multiple stakeholders like regulators, business owners, investors, and providers of funds should take reasonable steps to develop and publish relevant information on governance, practices, and step in with the capacity building measures. ACCA has published its report on how vision and strategy helps small businesses succeed, governance need of SMEs, in which we gathered feedback from more than 500 SME business owners from across the globe and tried to find out that how they are factoring in the three drivers of governance. Corporate governance or just governance is constantly evolving and there should be no one size fit for all solution. So we need to look at SMEs as a unique segment because they create productive employment and tangible economic benefits for so many people in Pakistan. One of the key aspects of the sound governance is ensuring that there is an appropriate balance between risk and reward. The Pakistan environment presents its fair share of risk, so we must collectively, through such dialogues, identify the needs of SME for growth and prosperity and put in place supporting policy that helps them achieve these long-term aims. So lastly, I am delighted to welcome such an experienced and diverse panel, Mr. Ghalib Nishtar, Ms. Nadia Seth, Mr. Kamal Ahmed, Amjad Mia, Ms. Sonia Seth for being with us today. I would also like to welcome all employers and guests who are present here in the hall and who have joined us online. Yeah. Let me now call upon my colleague, Mr. Arif Masood Mirza, Head of Policy MISA, to please come forward and share findings of the report and set the scene for panel discussion. Over to you, Arif.
Thank you. Yes, you can give Shahid a big round of applause. Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome the panelists here as well, especially Ghalib Nishtar, who's flown in from Islamabad, especially for this event. Thank you very much, Ghalib, for flying in. I'm going to make a slow start to the slides. Now, for those of you who are seated right at the back and cannot see the screen, I apologize for that. Can I ask the media people that, once you've set your cameras up and, you can just sort of get out the way and leave the cameras on remote? You don't need to be standing in front. Thank you so much. Sonia, welcome to the event. Thank you for joining us. So ACCA has always, like Shahid said, has been interested in looking at governance. Essentially, we've been concentrating on corporate governance for large entities. And a lot of the time, corporate governance is monopolized by large entities. So because they're deemed to be in the public interest. So there's codes and there's regulations and there's OECD codes for corporate governance for listed companies. And so one tends to ignore how governance can fit in with SMEs. So this is an attempt to sort of look at three if you like, drivers of governance, which we deem to be important. So one is vision, and Murphy's Law has stepped in. Oh, there we go. So this research is really about how vision and strategy help small businesses to succeed, and the role of leadership. So the leadership, if you like, plays a central role in driving vision, in driving strategy, and also people capabilities, whether that's capabilities of the leadership itself, or whether that's leadership of the entire capabilities of the entire workforce. So there's no way that this particular study represents the silver bullets, if you like, of success for SMEs. It's just one aspect. And there are a number of factors that probably help businesses to succeed, and luck is also one of them, So the contents of the report, therefore, are not, an all-encompassing success story. Let me tell you a little bit about the demographics of the respondents. So when we targeted the sample, we looked at we got 488 responses, but we sent it to a worldwide audience. So we shared the survey questionnaire with over 500, but at the end of the day, we only got 488 responses. When we break down those responses, we had 74% from the corporate sector. So they were SMEs, but really private limited companies. We had 17% from financial services, and not-for-profit 9%. So I think, excuse me, जो आप मीडिया वाले जो ये बल्ब जो है इसको बंद कर दें. Thank you. वो ऑडियंस के दिक्कत हो रही है. And then if we look at the regional breakdown, we then had Middle East accounting for 5% of the responses. We had Asia Pacific, which includes China, it includes Malaysia, Singapore, that accounted for 22%. And then South Asia, unfortunately, where Pakistan really, ACCA has the largest footprint in South Asia within Pakistan. But we got a very poor response. Now, I don't know why we got that poor response. I can make guesses. But I think what we are looking to do is after this event is to perhaps re-release the questionnaire, because we have all the processes behind it, but maybe translate it into Urdu and then resend it out again and see, and then we can look at the results later on and I can distribute them. Europe 44%, Africa 15%, and Americas and the Caribbean 8%. Most importantly, we try to break down, segment the responses into the sizes of the organization. So 18% belong to organizations of 1 employee, 1 to 9 employees, so really micro, small businesses. And then the small to medium would be 10 to 49 employees, 29% of the sample size came from that audience, and 50 to 250 employees, 46%. So a large majority of the responses were coming from medium-sized enterprises, i.e. 50 to 250 employees. Now, if you can't see the slide from where you are seated, these graphs also appear in the report that's in your folder. So if you go through the report, you'll find these graphs there as well. I have to also admit that most of the respondents were qualified accountants as well. So, there is a bias within the responses, we're an accounting body. Most of our members work in SMEs. Most of our stakeholders are qualified accountants. So there is the caveat is that a lot of the responses are also biased towards qualified accountants. At the base of each slide, so as I run through them, I've indicated the questions that we asked the audience. So this is question 3. As of today, how many people are employed in your organization? And that comes up there. I don't know whether... Right, so the next slide is again continuing with the demographics. That gives us the age of the organization. So we wanted to know how old these organizations were that these respondents belong to. And a vast majority of the organizations belong to over, I think it's over 10 years. So the base of the bars, the histogram, indicates that most of the organizations are over 10 years old. Yeah. And then some are over 5 years, but up to 10 years. Some are over 2 years, but up to 5 years, etc. And some are over 1 year and up to. So, but the vast majority are over 10 years old. Of interest is technology. A lot of SMEs are now using technology. So we wanted to find out how many of them are using technology, digital, in order to grow their business. And 44% said yes, they do use fintech or e-commerce or digital, and 56% said no. Now remember, most of the sample is now with Asia Pacific and Europe, so that's indicative. Maybe, you know, it's even lower here. Percentage of professional accountants, like I said, vast majority are professional accountants. Over 83% have been in operation over 5 years. The next question was, to the best of your knowledge, what time span do your organizations, you know, set vision or strategy? So over a planned period or development. Now, for the purposes of definition, vision of an organization is really a series of signposts to its stakeholders on the direction of its journey. So where are we heading? Yeah. You know, what's our final destination? So that's vision. And every organization in some form or another, whether it's communicated or not communicated, ought to have a vision. Yeah. If you go to the websites of Khushali, if you go to the websites of Fast Cables or Smida, they have a vision, yeah, which is on their website. So that really is an indication from the leadership of where they're taking their stakeholders. Over 70% of the respondents said their vision is 3 years or longer. Yeah. So a finite, you know, period that they were looking at. So 3 years or longer, and that's what one would imagine. This becomes a little shorter among the smallest businesses. So if you look at the smallest businesses, you know, which is the 0 to 9%, some of them say they do not have a vision. Yeah. So there are businesses out there, at least 15% in the small category, that do not have a vision. Yeah. They don't really know where they're going, or if they do know where they're going, they're not willing to communicate it. Yeah. And then under a year, so about 5% of the smallest organizations have a vision that's under a year. And then 15% of the smallest over the next 12 months, and so on. So that's indicative. Obviously, the larger the organization, so if you go into the medium-sized enterprises, the 50 to 250, you know, there's a larger volume of SME enterprises that have set a vision for longer than 3 years. You can probably see the percentages in your folder rather than on screen, but I'll tell you them from here. So up to about 30% within the medium-sized enterprises had a vision set for the next 5 years. For small enterprises, 28% had it for more than 5 years, the next 5 years, and so on. So that's, and this group showed the smaller group showed a higher number of people, like I said, saying no vision, and two others groups had similar percentages, again, of no vision at all. So that's when we then switched over to ask them about how long they're setting their strategy, which one would imagine would be a shorter period of vision. Vision is more sort of long-term and permanent, but here strategy is really defined as, the steps that one would take to achieve the vision. So they're breaking down the vision into steps and different missions in order to get to that vision. So, for example, if you're going to climb K2, the vision that you may have as a team set by the leader is to reach the peak. But when you set out your strategy to reach the peak of K2, there are a number of steps that you have to take. You have to go into training, you have to have the right people with you, you have to have oxygen suppliers and all sorts of equipment with you in order to achieve that. And then you go from base camp to camp 1 to camp 2. So there's a series. Similarly, in businesses, you need a mission and a strategy in order to reach your vision. The time span is much shorter for strategies. So 65% of the respondents said that their time frame for strategy is between 1 and 3 years. Amongst the smallest companies, i.e. those with up to 9 employees, 60% said their strategy is for 1 year or less. So they're not really looking beyond that. However, among the two other groups, the small and medium, their strategy may be for 5 years for significant minorities, 21% for 10 to 49 of the category, the small group, and 25% for the medium-sized enterprises. And that's less than a year. This graph asks the question, does your organization have a person or team responsible for developing a strategy? Okay. So this was a multiple choice question, and the owner manager, the CEO, plays a major role in setting the strategy. That's clearly coming out, and that's what one would anticipate in SMEs. As the company grows in size, the role of senior management team increases. So the taller graphs there, the red skyscrapers, that's indicating that it's senior management executive team. And the gray skyscrapers are indicating it's the owner manager. So clearly, if you look in the smaller companies, 64% are saying it's the owner manager. Non-executive directors, which are often found in larger companies, non-executive directors' involvement is limited in all groups. For smaller companies, there's probably not any distinction between owner, director, and they will never have, my guess, a non-executive director. The next question we asked the sample was, how often does the team or the person discuss the strategy? So, and then they had to choose from options. So most respondents, when they were asked this question, how often does a team meet up and discuss strategy? Most respondents say that their leadership discuss strategy at least 4 times a year. Yeah. And you would assume that 4 times a year then coincides with directors' meetings or quarterly meetings that they may have. Yeah. Amongst the smallest companies, over 40% would do so at least once a month. Now that seems, quite frequent in terms of discussing strategy. So therefore, there may be some challenge in terms of understanding what strategy means. Yeah, it may be that once a month they're only looking at challenges they're facing. Yeah, and they may see those challenges in terms of a strategic move, but they're mainly tactical. So, tactical meetings versus strategy meetings, there may be a misunderstanding amongst the smaller Amongst the larger entities, it appears that strategy discussion coincides, like I said, either with their leadership team meetings or with board meetings. The other area where strategy may happen is if they have it once a year, and someone have indicated that, then that may be the time when the financial statements are produced. So financial statements produced once a year, you may sit down with your auditor or your accountant and go through them, and you may believe that that is a strategic discussion. The next question is on stakeholder engagements. So is there anyone external to the organization involved in developing strategy? Yep. So in an ever-changing world, the organization must understand and interact appropriately with its internal and external stakeholders to get their buy-in. Many businesses do not involve external parties in strategy discussions. So maybe, this is an area for providers of funds, for providers of equity, loans, etc., that they may wish to have, some interventions here. And it may be part of the covenants of agreements that they have with the borrowers in terms of how they can provide, that external intervention. Larger entities, however, use external parties more. That's coming out of here. So nobody external, that's the longer bars are nobody external. Then bank lenders, only 4% overall for the respondents. The next, number 2 to nobody external was consultants and independent advisors. Professional accountants is around 11%. So only 11% of the organizations are really consulting the professional accountants for strategic support. The analysis of the written comments on why they're not using external parties is just here. So 61% who said they didn't need anybody. They said they had sufficient skills in-house to develop strategy. The strategy is developed by the owner of the organization, and he or she prefers to develop it internally with the available resources. The owner managers think that they know it all. They don't need anybody else. Time and cost was another factor. External consultation fees are high. They don't know if any external advice exists. And 10% not considered. The thought of hiring someone to help with strategy seems rather odd to them. Let me hurry on through these now. The next, SMEs seek out knowledge and experience constructive criticism. So this tells you the benefit of bringing external parties in. And 57% said that they brought external parties in for constructive criticism and independent perspective. The next one was around experience and knowledge of the industry. So people are bringing in people because they have specialist knowledge of the industry. And then it drops down to lower amounts for different people from different backgrounds. Maybe that's because of the non-executive directors, etc. Knowledge of law and regulations, etc. Maybe accountants in that case, and lawyers. The next question we asked was, how does the leadership team assess its own balance of skills? So this is around the people capabilities. So how are they assessing their own type of skills? And the respondents were then asked, 61% of respondents said that the balance of leadership skills are assessed. So they are tested to one means or another. The means to assess leadership skills are normally informal. Most respondents just mentioned that they had an internal discussion and that was their level of assessment. Many do not really consider this an agenda item, so it's not really relevant to them assessing the skills of the leadership. And larger entities are maybe using a matrix of some kind, a competency matrix, or a behavioral matrix. So what does that suggest to us? That internal discussions, a lack of formality, very casual sort of approach to leadership skills. So without any assessment, how does the leadership team remain confident that they collectively have the necessary range of skills So 37% said they've never had any issues with the leadership skills. 29% said that it wasn't a real priority for them assessing leadership skills. 19% said they didn't have the financial resource to check the skills of the leadership. And 15% said they had other means, ad hoc means of assessing skills. Leadership competency, how does your organization evaluate the performance of the leadership? And again, you know, it's about meetings, it's about internal reviews, attendance and participation. So, you know, if people are continuously attending meetings, then that's an indicator of leadership competence. External evaluation, board consultation, etc., that's part of it. But I leave those up there for you to have a look at. They're in your packs as well. Let me move on. This is really around accountability and external presentation of your financial position and prospects and who you present. So does the leadership team ever present the organization's financial position and prospects to external parties? Now, 55% said that they're providing this information to banks and providers of funds, which is what you would anticipate. That drops down to 47% as a total, but 55% for medium, 44% for small, and 31% for micro. So that's indicative, the longest bars there are indicative of presentation to banks and providers of finance. After that is to owners and shareholders. Some are presenting to trade partners. So within your value chain, you may be presenting to partners. Some are presenting to industry regulators. I don't know whether you get access at SMEDA to financial statements, but regulators, obviously SECP, are being presented with financial statements. Apart from the organization's financial position and prospects, is there any other information that SMEs are sharing? You know? So some are sharing their budgets and forecasts, some are sharing sustainability information, some are producing a regulatory report, but all in all, I think for our environment, I think there's very little in terms of non-financial information being provided. Only a handful of listed companies, in fact, are now producing sustainability reports or integrated reports. The next one is really around one of the drivers around the people's capabilities, and you only build people's capabilities when you're communicating with your employees. So even with the best leadership, business growth will ultimately depend upon people. With advancing technology, including automation and artificial intelligence, we may jump to the view that fewer people will be required in SMEs and enterprises later on. But the need for judgment capabilities and decision-making capabilities will always exist. The innovation and creativity of people is also fundamental. All organizations will require human involvement. Leaders are therefore responsible for these key drivers, and they need to be aware of how they interact and ensure they support each other to optimize the efficiency. Many entities communicate with their employees via team meetings. You know? So a very easy way of communicating. The decrease amongst smaller entities may indicate that they may not consider regular communication amongst the team as meetings, So smaller entities, maybe 1 or 2 people up to 9, don't really have regular team meetings. They may all be sitting in one room, for example. Yeah. So if they're sitting in one room, they're sharing conversations, there's no need for regular formal communication. And there does not seem to be any correlation between entities that use technology and the use of mobile online platforms. Yeah. So, there is increasing use of mobile platforms and social media for communication. Yeah. The alignment of employee incentives with strategy. Yeah. So organizations motivate their employees by mainly financial means and development opportunities with increased responsibilities. The availability of such incentives tends to be popular amongst larger companies. So the larger companies, do see a higher correlation. So if you look at the category 50 to 250, financial incentives and bonuses represent the longest bar there with over 50%. Professional development is also part of the incentive scheme, promotions, and the lowest bound is really share options, which you really wouldn't find in SMEs anyway. Right, moving quickly on. To conclude the survey, we asked what critical factors enable businesses to prosper over the long term and why. And we had about 368 responses. And those responses were split into critical factors that enable businesses to prosper. So you can see at the bottom, over 30% of the 368 responses were a good team, good staff, good people capabilities is coming out as the most important aspect. Then strategy, then resilience and competitiveness, finally business process, and then at the very top, liquidity. Now that may change here, because like I said, we didn't get a strong sample size from Pakistan. Maybe liquidity, cash flows is really an important factor for SMEs in Pakistan. Yep. I know compliance, whenever I go to the Chamber of Commerce and we meet up with members at the Chamber, one of the real sort of headaches of businesses is compliance. Whether it's taxation compliance or whether it's regulatory compliance, that seems to be a major obstacle. So this is the last slide, basically to sum up that, vision, strategy, and people were considered to be the main ways that we would articulate governance for SMEs. And then these had to be driven by excellent leadership. Yep. But leadership itself needs to be continually monitored as well for capabilities. It needs to be assessed. And then the gray box represents the external environment. So whilst you may have vision, strategy, and people internally, externally with the external environment, you need to ensure that your organization is aligned with its customer base, with other external parties. You need to have strong stakeholder relationships. You need to be communicating your vision and your strategy externally as well to your external stakeholders, again, your customers, your regulators. And there needs to be alignment of processes, business processes, and procedures. So strong compliance and internal controls and business processes. So those are the key components. You may not agree with this because, it's about a paper that we've come out with in terms of looking at these specifics. And I hope that the members here, our employers here, that when we have the panel, and we'll ask the panel to articulate in their own words, their own definitions and what they think are priorities. But please think about useful questions, especially questions that then we can take to a Pakistani audience later on. Yep. So that we can really focus on which areas of vision, governance, or another driver may be important for businesses here. So let me leave it there for now, and let me call up on stage the panelists And so let me first of all call up Ghalib Nishtad from Khushali Bank. Ghalib, please welcome our guests as they come up. Ghalib Nishtad is the President and Chief Executive of Khushali Microfinance Bank. Very relevant to our discussion because Khushali lends to small, medium-sized enterprises. Can I invite Gamal Amjad Mia, Executive Director at Fast Cables? Again, Fast Cables, now has a little over 300 employees. I checked on your website. So they're in that medium-sized category. But they have gone through that journey of reaching to where they are. So it'd be interesting to get Gamal Mia's views on how Fast has really embedded some of these drivers in its own. And then for the first time ever at an ACCA event, we've got two siblings. We've got Nadia Said, who's General Manager of Policy and Planning from SMEDA. So a big welcome for Nadia. And we've got Sonia Said, who's Deputy Component Lead, Business Enabling Environment, USAID, Small and Medium Enterprise Activity. So Sonia is working on a project to actually develop policy to support SMEs in Pakistan. So we've got the panelists here. Now I want you to think of questions because I don't want to be talking anymore. Okay? But I'm going to ask each of the panelists, starting from the left, for your opening comments. In terms of what I really would like is really an opening statement and your opinion on whether governance articulated in terms of vision, strategy, people and leadership is key for SMEs in Pakistan as well. So maybe, just an opening statement from each of you on whether you think, this connects. You'll have to use the mic, Ghalib. That's it.
It's working. I think my association with the ACCA over the years and the binding factor and connection with ALEC has been small business. They've been pursuing this very rigorously over the years, and we at Khushali are very passionate about the small business promotion anywhere in the world, but especially in Pakistan. So I'm delighted to be here, and to your question, that governance obviously is critical to any enterprise. So I would say that it's very relevant and critical to micro, small and medium enterprises as well. And I think what you've, in terms of the gist of what you presented, so I would say it's relevant in terms of leadership. Leadership coming up with the vision and the strategy. Then I think the next thing which I came out from the report was also for the leadership to come up and put up a very competent and effective team of people. The next was, I think, another important point which I picked up was the ability of business, which is a strategic driver of any organization, to work very closely with finance and accounts. Business looks at the market, the opportunities, but the finance keeps an eye on the strategic drivers and KPIs. So if they're able to work together and steer businesses, there's a lot more chance of success. So that's something very important I picked up. And finally, obviously, the changing environment, you need resilience, you need competitiveness, and you need to adapt to all those changes. So I would say that overall, all very relevant to small businesses also. Coming to your presentation, I would say that I was looking at the respondents and the areas which have come in, mostly I think Asia Pacific and more developed markets like UK and others, where you would find more articulate presence of accountants within the businesses. But I think as you move closer to our part of the world, I think that would be missing, and maybe that is one of the reasons that you've got such a low response from the small business segments in Pakistan. So I would say that the principles do apply to the SMEs, but then SME environment, the SME, the level of SMEs at which they're operating also varies drastically across regions and across parts of the world. In terms of Pakistan, I would say we have a huge informal markets. We have a lot of SMEs, we have micro enterprises, we've been working with millions of them over the years. But I think my only ask would be that from ACCA, that how would you, I mean, we've come from a very structured background. We come from banks like Citi and Bank of America's, but we've learned to work with the informal markets very well. And now we realize that the opportunities which are there are tremendous. The microfinance banks are growing at 40% a year for the last 5 years. Big banks are not growing. If you look at the profits and the returns which are being offered by microfinance banks are fantastic compared to anywhere in the world. If you look at the commercial banks, the results are going down. So we've learned to work with these people, with these businesses, and I think we have a great opportunity and potential going forward. So I wish you could come up with some ways, business development services, accounting services, specialist services, to be able to work with them. And if you can do that, I think that would be a tremendous thing to say. Last point I want to make, I'm stretching a bit, but I think what I've been reading recently, and I'm delighted that the focus is shifting onto small businesses across the world, and I'll give you some signs of that. The first sign that I picked up is the UN now focusing on small businesses. June 27 is the day of MSMEs in the world, so they recognize the importance of MSMEs, and I think the focus is going to come on MSMEs all over the world. The second important point I would say, what matters in business is the global trade agreements which take place, and these agreements take place at the organizations like the WTO. But they've been talking big businesses, big trade, cross-border trades. But today they've created a forum within the WTO which is called the Friends of MSMEs. So they realize that MSMEs are going to be the future. The financial sector report which comes out from McKinsey's in New York, you read the recent report on 2030 vision by HSBC. It all focuses on emerging markets in our part of the world and on small businesses. They're very important. And lastly, coming back home, I believe we have a new government in place which is focusing on investment, driving the economy through investment. We're talking about business, and it's focusing on what we call in the world and terminology, ease of doing business, and they're articulating their documents and trying to improve Pakistan's score. I wish they will also include small businesses as part of the strategy.
Thank you, Galit, for that opening statement. Kamal, Nia, would you like to also share from your perspective as well?
I think Galit sir has very rightly pointed out the backbone of any economy are the small businesses. We in Pakistan, unfortunately, have not really focused on them as much as it should, and mostly the policy making activities, the stakeholders' involvement have been more in the large scale businesses. And one primary reason, well, there are many reasons, but one of that is that many of our SME businesses are in the informal sector. And being an informal sector, you don't have a place on the table when it comes to interaction with the regulators, with the policymakers, and your data also is not really accounted for anywhere. So being part of the Lahore Chamber of Commerce and taking some initiatives there, bringing these issues on the forum, we really struggle to make a case for a business where there is hardly any number one data available. Number two, the members are in the informal sector, they are very reluctant to share their information. So these are some of the many challenges which has kept our very important segment of the economy, which is SME, really out of any serious effort to upgrade there when it comes to skill sets, when it comes to initiatives like having a vision, a strategy, and a plan. To give you a small example, more than 95% of the business in Japan is done by SMEs. Now, if you look at, well, Japan has the Toyotas and all the Hondas and the likes, who are giants. But despite that, they are less than 5% of the total economy when it comes to GDP contribution. Because they themselves have realized, and how the things work there is that Toyota is fed by 200 plus SMEs, and all Toyota is doing is the design of the car and the assembly and the final paint and check and balance and the delivery. The rest of everything has been outsourced to the SMEs. So that's just an ideal scenario we are looking at, that we can benchmark Japan. If Japan can do it, then why can't we do it? Now, our challenges are, as I mentioned earlier, is that we still are not taking this sector, number one, seriously. Number two, the people in this sector still do not grasp the opportunity they have. Because I being from an organization, now 33-year-old, we, like any other family business, started with few machines and with maybe 5-7 people. And over the period, what really helped us grow and now become, we are scale-wise and product range-wise the largest in Pakistan. What drove us was our vision and our strategic planning, which was driven by that vision. So that's an example, just experience sharing, that the opportunity here in this market does exist. And we cannot blame every time in China that they have taken our market. Chinese investors in the Hall Chamber yesterday, and he was saying the same thing. He was saying you just need to look at how you can improve your manufacturing processes and how you can enhance your the skill sets to compete. He said, despite having all the subsidies, we sent a purchasing delegation to Pakistan with $500 million budget, and all that purchasing delegation could do purchases of around 150 million, because despite all the effort, either the products were not meeting the standards or they were too expensive despite all the things they were building in when it comes to subsidies. So that's where the opportunity is. That's what actually we need to focus. I believe ACC that this initiative is extremely important and well timed, because the government focuses on this direction, as I also mentioned, and we all need to really talk more and more about it.
Thank you, Nadia. So, Nadia, a very interesting part that Kamal picked up on was on global competitiveness, and that is, extracted from your Speedo's vision. So the 500 million purchase order that came in, but only 150 million was met, does indicate that that there's no global competitive edge that SMEs have. So, what your opening statement, please, Nadia?
Thank you, Arif, for the opportunity, first of all. Most of the things have already been said by our distinguished panelists. I'd just like to add a bit of structure to Pakistan's economy when we're talking about the SME sector and what are we looking at, what are the size of established firms, and the informality of business has already been mentioned. Data being an issue has already been mentioned, but whatever statistics that are available in Pakistan when we qualify the SME sector, it's based on the Census of Economic Establishments, which was conducted way back in 2005, long overdue now. According to that data set, there are 3.2 million economic establishments in the country. 99% of those are SMEs. And if you break it down further, it's very interesting to see most of them, if you look at the standard definition for micro enterprises, fall within that framework of about 96% firms with a size of 1 to 5. Coming to your question of whether leadership, vision, strategy in Pakistan's context is relevant or how important it is certainly important. You can't deny that. And looking at these smaller firms, it's extremely important when we're talking about building the capacity and enhancing the scale and scope of these enterprises, increasing the competitiveness. Only from micro can they graduate to the small size, from small to medium, and then to the large enterprises. Kamal Sir just shared his personal experience also. Started off small and now the biggest in the country. I'm sure we have quite a bit of lessons to learn from here. Now, it's very heartening to know that yes, at the international level, SMEs is a very important pillar for economic development of countries. In the developing world, it holds a lot of significance because most of the developing world operates as more or less the same kind of economic establishment. For the developed countries as well, the experience of Japan has been mentioned, Korea is the same. You look at Taiwan, it's the same experience. The US, the kind of support that is provided by the public sector for the SME development ranges. So they look at the macro policy level and within the government of Pakistan framework. Currently, there's a lot of focus of the government on boosting exports from this country, of course, because of our trade deficit as well. And what are they relying on is the capacity and capability of the SME sector to feed into the large sector. Japan is a classic example where the smaller firms operate as vendors and supply to the larger firms, and those are the ones that grow, are competitive, can meet quality standards, international quality standards, and then export to the world market. The current government's focus is on developing an SME policy. The first SME policy for Pakistan was developed in 2007. It's again dated, and SMEDA initiated this exercise with the technical assistance of a USAID-funded project, Small and Medium Enterprise Activity. And we're currently going through a participatory process where we're trying to identify what are the key challenges and what kind of interventions are required from the public sector. What role can the private sector play in their own development, and the nexus between the federal government and the provincial government, because it's very important. We all are more or less aware of the issues of the SME sector, but when it comes down to actually designing intervention and their implementation, that's where policies are just shelved or not implemented probably possibly. So that's the area that we're currently focusing on. The policy itself will look at the cost, reducing the cost of doing business, ease of doing business, at providing a business development support structure to various organizations that the public sector already has. So you have training institutes within the government sector, you have certification labs in the government sector. The idea is to come up with an integrated framework to address the issues of SMEs and come up with a policy framework from which competitiveness of SMEs can increase and we can reach out to the market.
Thank you, Nadia. Sonia, from your point of view, where you're actually involved in, developing policy and doing that exercise, you also share your opening statement.
Thank you, Arif. First of all, I'd like to begin by congratulating ACCA for such an encouraging report, and it really presents a view on SMEs and how leadership, vision, and strategy is core element internal to an SME. Just to set the stage for SME development in Pakistan and what typically an SME sees and what are the factors that an SME takes into account. When you meet an SME, you'll get to know that most of the SMEs are not really clear on what vision is, what strategy is for them. So if you ask them a very basic question, what is your vision? They would probably just be telling you, okay, my vision is what I'm doing right now. They wouldn't lay it out in terms of what they want to achieve, what is their goal, what is a quantifiable goal that they are working towards. And when you come around and ask them, okay, what particular strategy have you adopted? They wouldn't probably understand the concept. And strategy is all about, limiting your choices within the vision, having and making those sort of strategic decisions that lead to strategic choices that lead towards a certain goal. When you put it in the context of factors internal to an SME and uh, and the enabling environment or the space within which the SME is supposed to operate, any SME operates really on path dependency, and they are more concerned about the external factors to their operations rather than something which is internal. So typically you observe that within the case of Pakistan, most of the economic sectors, they have really worked through policy vacuum or policies that are not well defined or not are not well articulated. Similarly, you notice that the legal and regulatory frameworks that are supposed to support the policy, they are really outdated. They are not really based on free market paradigm. And then when you come to institutions or the authorities that are supposed to look after policy implementation, you will notice that they are really limited in their capacity and the strategic direction that they should have within an organization. So this really presents the overall background in the case of Pakistan. When we talk about SMEs, there are so many challenges that an SME faces. My distinguished panelists have already mentioned so many challenges. To begin with, there's this challenge of corruption, lack of access to finance, infrastructure, regulatory burdens, legal burdens. There is an information gap, information gap, and then there's a general mistrust within the government as well. So when you're faced with so many challenges which are external to the organization, you're really every day sitting down and thinking, okay, how do I address these challenges? And that's where projects like the one which I'm associated with. So we're a USAID funded project, which is typically working with the small and medium enterprises in Pakistan. And with this renewed commitment from the government to revitalize the SME sector, we are helping the Ministry of Industries and Production through the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Authority to actually come up with a new SME policy, which really looks at easing out the business environment, which looks at the requisite regulatory frameworks. One of the core areas which was identified in the former policy was a lack of implementation, which primarily stemmed out of the issues of lack of coordination between governments. So federal government with the provinces and in between provinces, there's a lack of coordination. So we are looking into those areas, and we'll be coming up with a broad-based, cross-cutting policy that actually lays out a complete roadmap for SMEs in Pakistan.
Thank you, Sonia. Now, before I open it up for questions, I mean, one of the burning questions that I have is, supposing the government does nothing, supposing the government doesn't intervene at all with any policy, with any capacity building, we just leave it to, the market forces, for example. We just allow the invisible hand to allow SMEs to grow and prosper, and those who don't survive, well, the survival of the fittest, they just go out of business. So, and then if you look at, the websites of a lot of the providers of funds, most of the people setting up their own businesses are doing because, they face some sort of family catastrophe. A husband has died, the widow and 5, 6 children don't have a means, and automatically all they can rely upon is to start their own business. So, and I don't know the percentage of our SME population that starts off in that way, but it seems to me that initially your vision is just about surviving. You just need to put bread on the table, and that's it. And then clothing, and then education. So, what, Ghalib and others, would you like to address this question that I'm struggling with? That we want SMEs to grow and prosper to shift our GDP growth, because that seems to be the panacea, for all our ills. But a lot of SMEs are just, they're just there to survive. So I don't know whether there's a question in there, but does governance, and I'm challenging my own paper, does governance and vision and leadership matter when it's just about survival? Who'd like to take that one?
I think I'll take this. So so first of all, it's really about having the culture of entrepreneurship within a country. So in the case of Pakistan, while we notice that gradually that culture is taking place, a lot of these entrepreneurial skills, they come out of people when they are actually in universities. And we see that initially there was a missing linkage between industry and academia, but now academia has taken on that active role and they're offering courses in entrepreneurship and everything. So that actually really indicates that, okay, the interest is building up within the country and the focus is there. But it's not really about only those entrepreneurial skills. It's also self-drive, and it may stem out of any unfortunate incidents, maybe, or circumstances. And when you start off a business, and considering the challenges that I've mentioned, you're operating on being small, you're operating on so many levels. So you're also the stakeholder, you're also the management, you're also looking after the day-to-day operations. And as the size of the business expands, the complexity in it expands, and then bring in more and more people. So for that, really, it's crucial that you have from the side of the government, I think, because you're dealing with the government at the end of the day, you'll see that a lot of these businesses, they are operating in an informal economy, and if you ask for any sort of information from them, like you discussed in your report or disclosing their financials or anything, they wouldn't really be disclosing anything. The first thing that they'll say is, oh, we don't want any government agency running after us on taxation issue or anything. Most of the SMEs, they get to know about any compliance requirement only when an inspector comes and visits them. So there's a huge information gap, and the only driver for any SME is probably this motivation, self-motivation, and that's all.
What you said and what you intuitively mentioned as, businesses, mostly SMEs, survivalist businesses, if I may say, or are driven out of necessity. I think that intuition may not be too off. Here, I think the role of microfinance institutions has been phenomenal when it comes to this. But with the financial institution or the financing that is being provided to these people who are vulnerable groups even, I wouldn't say that there's a social protection angle to it as well, but let's not go there. If you bring in the business development support services along with the access to finance, that's where these survival or necessity-driven businesses will actually move on to be more entrepreneurial, if I may say so, and graduate to a higher level and contribute to the GDP and to the national economic growth. That's the way the microfinance has grown over the years in the country is actually phenomenal. It's a successful case for us to look at. And if we can bring in and integrate the entire system through a business development support mechanism, all right, fine. You're a small firm, started small because you had to put bread on the table, and things like that. But then, okay, let's impart certain skills to you. Okay, let me try and develop this as a longer term business for you. Let's come up, develop a business plan for you. Where do you see yourself going in 5 years? Let the government, or even for that matter, not the government, the private sector business development service providers market has to be developed. So we're talking about not just accounting is a fairly developed profession in this country. You have, you're aware of that. And similarly, the legal services, private sector providers are there. But then for these smaller firms or for the micro firms, access to them, it comes at a certain cost. So if, let's say, the state were to intervene, the state should not directly be a provider of services, but it should develop a market where this vacuum can be filled.
Are there any examples of clients, that you've come across who, made that step change from going from just providing or serving a lifestyle to having a bigger vision? When does that actually happen? So you know, you serve a purpose of bread and butter, but then suddenly your vision, you know, increases, your strategy increases. What triggers that off?
Well, we haven't seen much of that because we are actually operating in the 1 to 9, the lowest tier, and the micro ones, smaller ones, where it could happen, but it could be a bit agitated, so it's a bit far away. So you may see that more happening in the next segment, the 50 or the 250 ones, possibly where they see value for these having a more articulate strategy. And I think one thing which was missing, they were saying, discussing strategy monthly. I don't think you need to discuss strategy monthly. The strategy has to be supported by plans, which are developed every year, and those plans are steered and monitored every month. So I think that I saw it missing. So I haven't, to your question, I haven't seen that happening. But what we just recently went through a survey of University of New York, and that report hopefully should be out and probably share it with our colleagues here. And they were focusing on why are we not engaging business development services for the small businesses. Is it the cost? And if it's a question of cost, who is going to pay that cost? So one of the questions was, would you be willing to pay the cost as a bank to engage and get more customer loyalty, better business sense, and all that? So let the report come out and see. Because right now there doesn't seem to be any owner of the BDS services, either the business owner itself, which probably finds it strange to do so. And secondly, banks right now really focus on a very narrow financial service access mode. So they're not looking beyond that. So there's something missing there. And on the government's part, yes, obviously government is the enabler, but the government needs to be a facilitator for these businesses and not a draconian regulator, which kind of, right now people, people are being taxed through the banking system, which is just not, I think it's not right. I mean, one of your strategies says financial inclusion, right? And the same ministry is where the taxation people are part of is excluding people out of the system. So I think you need to focus at that level, and then hopefully things will fall in place. Another motivator, which rightly we were stressed out. We had a woman in Karachi whose husband was killed in Target killing, and she had family, she had nothing to do. She was forced into setting up a school. She runs a 300 people school. That's one reason to support you. But I think a lot of positive is that women, which are nearly half the population, and families are feeling the economic stress. And that's forcing women to come into the mainstream and being entrepreneurs as business people. So I think that's another factor, inflation and economy and stress, which is forcing people to get into businesses also. But I hope there's a positive reason to get into business as well.
Let me just open it up to the audience, because you've been sitting quite patiently. You've been listening to the opening statements. You've been listening to the questions as well. Now, a lot of you, I assume a lot of you work in finance for SMEs. So let's ask some interesting questions that can really help us as well in the future to develop the questionnaire for Pakistan once again. So if you'd like to stand up, introduce yourself, yeah, and who you work for, what your role is, and then ask your questions. And ask a question. Please don't make a statement. Okay? Just ask a great question and who you would like to answer it. So you have the mic.
My name is Mohammad Zishani.
Yes.
I'm a manager at National Logistics Cell.
NLC.
Okay. Sir, मेरा पहला क्वेश्चन ये है कि रेगुलेटर्स और पब्लिक सेक्टर की लैंग्वेज लोकल जो एसएमई ओनर है जब तक वो सेम नहीं होगी वो कम्युनिकेशन जो बैरियर है वो ट्रस्ट गैप में हमेशा रहेगा। एक तो मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि पिछले 10 साल से मैं ये देख रहा हूँ कि ये गैप मुसलसल है। तो दूसरा ये कि हमारा जो एसएमई ओनर है वो अननेचुरल प्रॉफिट से क्यों नहीं निकल रहा, वो हमेशा 50% से शुरू होता है और उसका उसी वजह से उसकी कम्पेटिटिवनेस है ही नहीं मार्केट में।
ये दोबारा बोला, अननेचुरल
प्रॉफिट दैट इज अराउंड 50%। मैंने जितने भी एसएमईज को देखा वो 50% से शुरू होते हैं और वो उस चीज को लॉस कर काउंट करते हैं जो कि 50% से नीचे आता है, मतलब उनका 20% पे आ जाए तो इट्स अ बिग लॉस। So, you know. So let's take 3 questions together. One question there, please.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मेरा नाम इरफान ज़का है। मैं एक अपना बिजनेस रन करता हूँ एक एसएमई को। मुझे मैडम नादिया से क्वेश्चन करना है कि जो इंफॉर्मेशन गैप की हम बात कर रहे हैं कि एसएमईज के दरमियान और अथॉरिटीज के दरमियान एक इंफॉर्मेशन गैप है, तो स्मेडा इसके लिए क्या स्टेप्स ले रहा है? दूसरी चीज ये है कि हमारी बॉडी एसीसीए ने हमें अलाउ किया है कि हम अपनी बिजनेस एडवाइजरी फर्म्स जो हैं, जो एसीसीए मेंबर्स हैं, वो बिजनेस एडवाइजरी फर्म्स को बिल्ड अप करें एंड वी कैन use this platform for 10 years without any charge. So we are ready. We are going to plan these firms, but how can we access to the SMEs? Is there any support available at SMEDA that we can start up from there to get information and to reach these bodies?
ये तो explain करेंगे 10 year free of cost.
Yeah, we have been the members have been offered to build up their advisory firms over here in Pakistan, and for Pakistan the ACCA body is offering that for 10 years they will not charge any fees.
The practice certificate license fee was waived
For 10 years.
but then changed. The policy was changed.
Okay, so that's our own.
Yeah.
So we want to use this platform from ACCA that if we are going to be allowed to practice business advisory services, or SMEDA can help us.
Great. Thank you so much. That's a good question. Let's take one more question and then we'll answer the 3 together. Last question.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kaisar Fayaz. I'm from Assistant Manager Accounts at Shata Sugar Mills. The whole story is that there are a lot of gap between the regulators and the small industry. And I think that gap can be bridged by by giving some जो ट्रेड यूनियंस हैं इनको अगर आप इनेबल करें और इनको कुछ जो है वो जो मार्जिनाइज कर दिया गया है अगर वो ना किया जाता तो शायद ये जो एक गैप है बहुत ज्यादा हर लेवल के ऊपर, तो ये शायद ये ब्रिज हो सकता था।
किसको मार्जिनलाइज किया?
जो ट्रेड यूनियंस है उनका रोल बहुत मार्जिनलाइज हो गया हुआ है, या तो मोनोपोलाइज हो गया हुआ है। जो जैसा मार्केट्स होती थी ना, मार्केट्स में ट्रेड यूनियंस होती थी, तो वो बहुत बड़ा एक जो था ना वो गैप को ब्रिज कर रही होती थी विद रेगुलेटर्स के साथ भी, और जो बाकी जो आपकी जो होती हैं टैक्स अथॉरिटीज के साथ भी, वो जो है काफी सारी चीजों को जो कर रही है।
Thank you. So the first question was, I think, around language and culture, you know, and the second one was that around, well, if they're not making super profits, then they're upset when they make 20% margins. They'd rather make 50% margins. So perhaps
I'll start with that. I think the first point is very relevant. I mean, what you're trying to say is that the industry and the government needs to be on the same page, and they need to be working with each other. They should be collaborative rather than they're seeing each other as a threat or taxation authorities and the business. So I think I agree with that. That's something which I alluded to. And unless the whole ecosystem comes into place, if you go to a place like England and all, there's huge demand for accountants, say 60 years retirement. Why? Because even the smallest of business needs to file its accounts. So they go in the evening do a part-time jobs, and there's a demand which is created. So it's all a demand-supply question. And so more articulation, reporting and all that. So multiple challenges. So I think I agree with the first statement that you made. And I would disagree with the second statement you made. I think somehow I feel that there's a sense in our country at least that profit is a bad thing. Profit is not a bad thing. Profit is, if it's done ethically, it's a motivator, it's an incentivizer, and that's the only thing which is going to drive you to expand. And that is the only thing which will help you to give benefits of profit to your employees, pay them better, do that, and expand your business. You need capitalization, and that's where it's going to come in. What should be the right number, 50, 70, 30? You must also realize that these SMEs and micro businesses run a huge risk. There's a huge risk cost because they're operating in a totally wide, unstructured environment. So if they are, the market is allowing them, and they're putting a lot of input in terms of their own labor cost, which is not visible to you, which is visible in the big industries, but their own understanding from day to evening, that cost they don't account for. They're not accounting the costs correctly. So with all that environment risk and not recognition of costs and other factors, if they're making profits, I think that's really fine.
Anybody else want to address any of the questions? So we've had the first one. If you would you like to answer the first one or the
At the time, the first and the second one together, information gap, yes, language gap. आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा कि एक लैंग्वेज का गैप होता है जो हम SMEs के साथ डील कर रहे होते हैं। तो जब तक उनसे उनके इश्यूज अंडरस्टैंड नहीं करेंगे जिस लैंग्वेज में वो बात करते हैं, और जब तक हम उनको उस तरह के सॉल्यूशंस नहीं देंगे जो वो समझ सकते हैं, काफी डिफिकल्टी होती है। Coming to and for that to address some of those reasons, कुछ चीजें इस किस्म की होती हैं. For instance, let's say we're talking about any compliance related issue. So what SMETA does is that obviously we try our best to translate whatever documentation that we have in English that can support businesses to grow, whether it is a regulatory procedure, यहाँ तक कि आप ये सोचिए कि बिजली का कनेक्शन आपने कैसे लेना है, तो इस किस्म की इंफॉर्मेशन तक को हम कोशिश ये करते हैं कि उर्दू में भी अवेलेबल की जाए। और जो हमारे काउंसलर्स होते हैं, जो हमारे बिजनेस एडवाइजर्स हैं, who are spread across the country. So we're a very lean organization. We're about 110 odd people across the country. But then again, with these 110 odd people that we have 21 regional business centers. Now, regional business centers are one-person offices जहाँ पे हमारा नुमाइंदा चेंबर ऑफ कॉमर्स में बैठा हुआ होता है, ताकि लोग वहाँ पे चेंबर्स पे आते हैं। स्मॉल एंड मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस भी होते हैं, लार्ज बिजनेसेस भी ऑफ कोर्स होते हैं, लेकिन ये बिजनेस हब्स में लोकेटेड हैं, ताकि so that we can gauge the pulse of the SMEs, we can understand the demand of the SMEs and design interventions and programs that will support them to grow. Coming to your question, what kind of support services does SMETA provide? Well, the direct support, I skipped the policy part of it, but coming to the direct kind of support services, we have an entire portfolio of business development products. Now, these products are available free of cost to anybody, to an existing SME, to a potential entrepreneur, which would include pre-feasibility studies, which would include business plan for a particular business. Then we also do training and capacity building activities. The model that we've adopted is that we go through an entire training need assessment exercise a year prior to our training calendar, and that's the way that our training calendar is designed. And these trainings are not imparted by SMETA itself. We engage with private sector training experts to deliver trainings in different areas, whether it's related to regulation, whether it is related to how to manage a small business, whether it's related to accounting and bookkeeping practices. What we can do for you mentioned the BDS advisory firms, the license fee that has been waived off by ACCA, and what SMETA can do to help you. We developed a design and consultants database. This is freely accessible to business development service providers. So all you need to do is provide your information in that consultants database, and that will be uploaded to our website, and you'll have the entire SMETA clientele looking at that website. On the average, we have something like 2,000 visitors to our website every day. Then again, if we have your information with us as a service provider, we'll be passing on that information to SMEs looking for that kind of a service that you are providing. So that's one thing that you may like to look at. Just go and visit SMETA's website. The information is right there. You can walk into our offices. We're located across Pakistan. Our head office is in Lahore. So is our regional office, and then Peshawar, Quetta, Karachi as well. We have offices in Gujranwala, Gujarat, and different industrial hubs. So I think that's one area where we can provide you assistance and support in reaching out to the SMEs for delivery of whatever business development support services that you are providing.
Great. Thank you, Nadia.
If I may, I'll just add to your point, Nadia. So given usually bridging the gap between the public and private sector, although we must give the due to the devil as well, government leaves the route for kuch karya for SME growth as well. And within the mandate of the project, we do look into advocating the needs of the private sector. और जब हम गवर्नमेंट को ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा sensitize करते हैं on the needs of the private sector. So just to quote one example, even in the area of this SME policy that we are developing for the government, हम actually focus group discussions करते हैं. We sit down with SMEs on one basis to understand their needs, and वही information then we from the horse's mouth we take it to the government and let them know कि जी ये private sector led solutions हैं to the problems that SMEs are facing. Then we also need to understand that unfortunately in the context of Pakistan, voice of SMEs that is missing on key policy forums as well. So we are also advocating, for instance, on the board of State Bank of Pakistan, there is not even one SME representation. So we are also proposing that sort of reforms which are very internal to the organizations that should be taken for SME promotion. On the business development support program, we are recasting what primarily Samita is also doing. Competitiveness SMEs can improve connectivity. We are undertaking a matchmaking exercise where we have enrolled your business development service providers, और उनको हम cost share करके we are linking the SMEs up with those business development service providers as well.
Well, would you like to talk about the trade union part, because you're very active in the Lahore Chamber?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that question was regarding the associations and the unions, which industry level unions are made, or the unions which are made within one industry. I think because I have watched this area closely since my involvement as a corporate member in Lahore Chamber of Commerce. Like overall governance issues in Pakistan, unfortunately the associations and these and logics and even chambers, they also have become a micro kind of image of what is happening in our national level. So they are no more democratic bodies when it comes to like real the spirit of democracy. So you would end up having people for their own vested, very small, and sometimes you fail to understand what kind of interest is that. Interest keep on having the ownership of those associations, pushing the agenda which they think is their agenda, and not really taking up the issues which are the real issues. So, so the representation is there. So government hasn't changed any law for the trade unions or the associations. In fact, I was about 2 weeks ago, I saw DGTO for our cable industry association. So me and some other cable manufacturers, and he was very, very negative of the associations, and we were saying, why you are so negative about association? These are good. It's a constitutional requirement to have association. We will have representation. And he said, the reason I am very negative because I see there are associations made for doing nothing other than having political kind of platform to have politics, to do politics. And then he gave many examples as well. So unfortunately, that has really kind of taken, I would say, or reduced the value of the associations or the unions because of some of the malpractices. But having said that, I will come to you the challenge which even associations are facing. I have tried when I was at the board of Lahore Chamber of Commerce. So I tried that government is asking for more and more. I would say that, let's say, filers, so to say. Do I disagree with the government that you don't pay tax? I think all of us pay tax because indirect tax is there. But as a filers, so government wants filers, and so I tried to convince some of those the market associations that why don't you guys voluntarily make your whole market become filer, and we do a deal with the relevant RTO or whoever is, that you are not going to disturb them, you're not going to go after them and harass them and make all those the under the table deals with them. And the challenge these guys are also facing that the cost of being outside the system is so low that no one wants to become part of the system. So that's where we note as the government that we need to have carrot and stick approach. Unfortunately, the people who have got used to charging 16% or 17% now as sales tax to the customers and then keeping all of that to themselves, it will be very difficult for them to give that to the government unless you have a proper governance, implementation, and assurance, or other, I would say it will be clear to them that if they do not comply, that there is a serious implication to that. We can't blame government all the time, though I do blame government because they fail every time in implementing what they decide. But at the same time, I think the associations are also helpless because their members are saying, why should we come into the system where we can live without outside the system with 1/4 of the cost, which system coming into system will cost us. So that's very unfortunate scenario we are facing with these.
So it does seem that, the market dynamics need to be looked at in terms of, the stakeholders' interests. And people making super profits, for example, are hardly going to give up those profits by legitimizing their enterprise. Let's take some more questions. Any more questions? So we have a question at the front. Let's take 3 together. Pehले mic idhar aa de. Your front row पे है. Front row पे है. उसके बाद then there's another question at the back. Keep your, and then there's another question there on the left-hand side. So kindly introduce yourself.
My name is Mustafa Ahmed Khan, and I'm the managing partner of a CA firm by the name of Mustafa Khan and Company. We are also ACCA training partners. So, as you mentioned, that whatever was being talked upon today wasn't Pakistan-centric. So I would like to give some comments as I've been working with the SME sector for the last couple of years very closely. So first of all, I believe that the biggest impediment as far as the execution of strategy is concerned are the regulations and compliances. I believe that the organization, the SME sector doesn't have the capacity to plan themselves and then to execute their strategy because of compliances, because of regulations, because of taxes, so on and so forth. So I would like to state a small case study which would, I believe, be of interest of you guys. 2 years back, we created a service within our CA firm. We thought that SME needs some support and some services, and they cannot afford it. So we created a service without looking at the financial part. We went to the SMEs and said that, okay, what we will do, how much it takes to you to hire a BCommer for say 2 years experience. They said that, okay, probably 30 to 40,000. So we said that, okay, our services start from 30,000, 40, even 20,000, 20, 30, 40, 50. We created certain services. Those included bookkeeping services, those tax services, compliance services, virtual CFO services, as well as giving them an ERP platform based upon their needs. We've been running the service for the last 1.5 years. We have around 12 clients. We haven't made a lot of profit, but we have seen that the need is there. So that is the key element for probably the UN lady or the SMEDA lady, that there is a need within the SME sector for these services. If there are people, if we can bridge this gap, and there are more, ACCA can play a big part in that. All the other accounting bodies can play a part, where they can create products, where, as my friend was stating the same thing, we can create products where we as the service provider can sustain, and the SME sector can also get benefit. And so that's one of my observations that I would like you guys to have a comment on that. Thank you.
So keep that one for later on, because I think that's a Smida sort of related question. Let's take one more question. Keep your hand up. Keep your hand up. Please introduce yourself.
जी मेरा नाम सुधीर चौधरी है, मेरा ताल्लुक भोल न्यूज़ से है। मैं पूछना चाहूँगा कि क्या हमें एसएमईज की आइडेंटिफिकेशन को रिविजिट करने की जरूरत है, जो इस वक्त मार्केट में सूरत हाल है। दूसरा, क्या मैं जान सकता हूँ कि मुल्क भर में कितने एसएमईज हैं और टैक्स नेट में कितने हैं और वो कितना टैक्स अदा करते हैं। हमें अभी थोड़ी देर पहले बात हो रही थी कि हुकूमत की तरफ से तो हम बड़ा उनके ऊपर एतराज करते हैं कि गवर्नेंस की जरूरत है, लेकिन क्या जो एसएमईज काम कर रहे हैं उन्हें किस हद तक अपना किरदार अदा करना चाहिए।
Thank you for that. And you're from Dawn News. Okay.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muswa Anju and I am founder of a fintech startup. So basically we do online bookkeeping in US, Pakistan and UK. So my question is that since we've been working with multiple small business owners across these 3 countries, but as a psychological wise, my question is addressed towards Nadia and Sonia. Do you feel like that our small business owners, are they coachable and are they receptive to the things, the key ingredients that are required in order to take them to the medium sector? And the second question is that we've discussed Japan a lot in this conversation, but are we actually looking at Philippines and what Philippines has done when we're making our own policy in the last 15 years?
Sorry, what has the Philippines done? I don't know.
Well, if you look at their outsourcing, in 2003, they were doing $1.5 billion of exports. So this year they crossed $27 billion.
Okay, so that's outsourced BPOs, shared services type of stuff. That's quite a specialist. So the first one was, I think somebody said we're getting bogged down with compliances. So the SME owners are bogged down with compliances. They should hand it over to financial services providers. I don't know if you want to take that one. Small sharing experiences.
Yes, just as I had mentioned earlier on, that's why we're saying that the government, and as Galit Saab also said, the government's role is that of a facilitator. That's why the private sector, that's why your role comes in. You are providing, you have a certain product portfolio, you're providing a certain service, you are in business because there is a certain demand within the market by other businesses. SMETA can play a role of linking you with those businesses, but you're going to be the service provider for that. And that's where our consultants database is something useful that perhaps you should look into. Coming to the other question regarding SME identification of SMEs, from what I've been able to understand of identification of SMEs, you're talking about the SME definition. How do we define SMEs? Now, there are a number of definitions in Pakistan, and that's one of the issues that we're looking at addressing while we're formulating the new SME policy. The State Bank has its own definition. The government of Pakistan has its own definition of small and medium enterprises. The statistics agency, the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, has its own definition of SMEs. In fact, they have small enterprises and then large enterprises, so there's no definition, so to speak, of medium enterprises. That's one of the fundamental reasons why we have data-related issues as well. I mentioned this earlier on is that the information is rather dated. It's based on the Census of Economic Establishments conducted in 2005, and then there, according to that assessment, there are 3.2 million SMEs across the country. We did a bit of in-house analysis to actually assess the SME sector, and we looked at the electricity commercial electricity connections. That's over 4 million in Pakistan. So those are all businesses. Whether they are all small businesses, that we need to look into. But the size would have, one would assume, would have increased over time. Coming to the tax net question, that's unfortunately a question that I cannot answer. That information would be available with the relevant government authority. Regarding the receptivity of medium-sized firms, the gentleman right at the end asked that question, that are SMEs or are firms within Pakistan gear, or do they have that vision to actually grow? I think that's where the government's facilitation and regulatory and compliance role comes in, that there should be no disincentive for firms to grow large. Why should firms stay small? Generally, firms tend to stay small when they feel that if they grow beyond a certain threshold, they will have to meet certain compliance and regulatory compliances. There'll be certain legal aspects to their businesses which need to be complied with in terms of regulation. So that is an area where the government needs to look into. Firms, I think an entrepreneur inherently is driven by profit motive and wants to grow. So why doesn't the government needs to focus on a firm graduating from a small to a medium to a large level.
And then there was a question around, why isn't there a focus on providing support to online service providers, outsourcing, BPOs, etc. India seems to have a very large outsourcing business segment. Philippines, so why? That's probably on the technology side.
There is that's on the technology side, but just to share that the government, the Ministry of Commerce, is already working on formulating an e-commerce framework for Pakistan. That should be out by the end of this year. So they're looking at various aspects to promote the e-commerce segment and BPO being part of that.
Well, please.
If I can just add, I think Mustafa's question was also relating to that we are talking about SME's role, and we are talking about what other countries have done. I think the challenge, I will share an experience while growing big, what we at Fast Cable face. And that tends to be the case with all the businesses, the people I speak to, and be the case with everyone. We as a strategy wanted to outsource many of the processes so that we focus on our core process. And unfortunately, each time we try that, we fail because the vendors who are with whom we are dealing with, they fail to keep the consistently same quality of the product, fail to meet certain timeline and these requirements. So that's where the biggest challenge comes when it comes to benefiting from this supply chain of medium to small to medium and the large manufacturing or the businesses. I think that's where the challenge, why the challenge is. The challenge is because the SMEs are not driven by a vision, a strategic plan, and have the people with proper skills and have the determination to make sure what they do, they consistently do it right. So that's where the challenge comes, where bridging this gap also comes. I would love to outsource 5-6 of my processes, because the lesser process I have in-house, the lesser headache I have. But each time you try, then you decide that, okay, it's better to just vertical integrate another process so that you can deliver what you commit to your customer.
So are you talking about the engineering side of your supply chain? Or are you talking about financial services?
I think the basic issues I'm talking about, the vision and the will and the determination. हम आम लफ्जों में बात करते हैं कि हम जुगाड़ लगाने में बहुत अच्छे हैं, ठीक है, लेकिन कंसिस्टेंटली एक चीज को सही करने में और उसके लिए जो विल चाहिए, उसके लिए जो डिटर्मिनेशन चाहिए, वो हमें लैक करती है. हम कहते हैं ठीक है, अभी चल रहा है जैसे चल रहा है. That kind of culture in SME is much more than the culture you would find the similar SMEs in Philippines or in Japan or elsewhere, because that until unless a cultural change happens, the SME cannot be trusted by the large scale or by anyone else to be their partner.
So in order to build that vision, is that building that vision, is it the providers of finance, is it their job to support that vision building? Would you say it's your job to when you're providing equity or funds, that you must have an intervention to ensure that there's an eye on keeping standards?
No, I think it's for the regulator. We're doing enough.
It's your job now.
Let me say, I don't think, frankly, let me say here, I don't think it's anyone's job. See, regulators can only facilitate to give me enough incentive to do something which otherwise I don't find. The real incentive is actually the market. Behavior cannot change by these interventions, by regulators. Now, I do recognize, what you are saying. For example, we at Fastcable have improved in many areas because our financiers wanted that. And the latest example is we got rating, I think a few weeks ago, we got rating. And when our banks told us to get rating, I said, look, we don't have any plan to really go to use it. And why should I incur extra cost? And this was coming from me, who believe in all those things. But then I was saying, okay, why should I spend extra cost? And they said, no, look, we have RORA, some of you know, risk-weighted return calculations. So we need to, we will price you better and so forth. So now, because of our bank's demand, we got rating. So these kind of things, the institutions do help each other. I believe we have another problem. Our GDP to debt to GDP ratio is very low, and Wallace is close to his heart because he is from the financial sector. And I think the one reason for that is because majority of the institutions are in informal sector. So we were talking, I think also, I'm not sure if last time when we had seminar in Lahore Chamber we discussed that or not, but we at Lahore Chamber were talking about having an initiative where we request banks to incentivize the SMEs that, okay, if you come to the formal sector with these minimum requirements for documentation, then we give you financing at much better terms than you would get otherwise. And that's where maybe facilitators can also come in and try to see that the economics of the cost there is workable, because ultimately no one wants to leave their reduce their profits because it's not a charity with their money. So that kind of intervention I think would be helpful, and it will incentivize people to also.
Yeah, I think these two things are picked up. Three things. Firstly, on the growth. Growth obviously comes from the market. The market is there. Number two, the aspiration. Aspiration comes from vision. You have to have a vision. Then your capacity to be able to grow and the resources and so on. So I think those are the drivers. The government is could incentivize that environment for you or disincentivize that environment for you. The government cannot drive you to grow or not to grow. On the two other areas which can be supportive in the environment, one is you talked about outsourcing, and that's something very close to my heart again, but I failed miserably also on that. And I find that the problem lies particularly in the ability to write contracts, outsourcing contracts. We understand that outsourcing, I will not hire any auditors, I'll give it to your firm, so this is outsourcing. What is missing is the performance standards. The service level agreements and the performance standard, what we don't really are not good at defining, because it's not just people to people, it's about delivery and efficiency and productivity. So contracts is one area which is very weak somehow, and the enforcement of that contract in our legal system is discourages outsourcing, misuse of the outsourcing. The other area which I see an opportunity and a challenge, that's technology. And with technology comes cloud computing. That's a huge opportunity where you don't have to have infrastructure, you don't need facilities, you can share. We have challenges in terms of the regulations that, again, that around cloud hosting and cloud computing and other areas, but that's a huge area of opportunity where regulation at the state, and we visit Sabah, can really play out for small businesses to be able to do that. They don't have to have.
Thank you. So, any more questions in the audience? Because this is your opportunity. If you've got a burning question that you want to ask. No questions? Great. So let me wind up then. I think we looked at the findings of the report, which indicated that from ACCA's point of view that vision and strategic planning and people capabilities, and at the heart of it was leadership, were important in order for businesses to prosper and grow. That came out of the discussion, because I think by the end of it, Glasshouse shared that fast cables has a supply chain, but within the supply chain, there are often vendors who are not meeting standards, and they're really not meeting standards because they may not have a vision. They don't have a strategy, they don't have a vision to make great products, not final products, but but products that go into their supply chain. So don't just think about final products, think about supply chains and the components that you feed in. ACCA, how we can support, obviously, there are ACCA members here, the professional members here, who want to offer financial services. They're not only, let's not think of accountants solely as providers of bookkeeping services, solely as providers of tax services. Now, increasingly, our curriculums have corporate governance embedded within them. We have a lot of technology embedded within our curriculum. We have a lot of ES, environmental social governance, embedded in our curriculum. So there's a whole sort of holistic range of services that the business advisory people at ACCA can provide SMEs with. So before the event, I was talking to the SMEDA people. We do have an MOU with SMEDA. We'll be looking to refresh that and see how we can update it in terms of what's going on today. I'll also be reaching out to Sonia to see whether the policy paper that we've developed with this serves any purpose in the work they're doing. But also there's a new policy paper. If you haven't downloaded, I'll do a bit of marketing now. अगर आपने वो ACCA Insights app को download नहीं किया from the Google Play Store, kindly do it. Okay? This particular report, ये भी उस पे आपको मिलेगी. और कल एक नई report आई है on strengthening and scaling up SMEs. That's also on the ACCA app. It's free of cost, doesn't cost you anything. So download that, and you'll have access to a brand new report on scaling up SMEs as well. Okay? So thank you all very much for attending. I think we had, how many people online, Harun? 100. We had 100 members online attending. Are there any questions from the online?
There were some comments that they made, but you were made towards questions. I mean, those have been answered.
Okay. And also the survey questions we've also been asking the online participants. So we should keep our fingers crossed. We should have 100. We're going to share those with the audience as well. So the housekeeping now is that there will be lunch in which hall?
It will be served here in this hall, but after our group and
we have the souvenir distribution now, followed by the group photo.
That's right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Arif. If I can please request you to come forward. A big hand for Mr. Arif Masood Mirza, Regional Head of Policy, region. I would now request Mr. Ghalib Nishtar, President Khushhali Microfinance Bank, to please come forward to receive the souvenir. Mr. Ghalib Nishtar, a big hand for Mr. Ghalib Nishtar. If you can please stand in the center, that would be fine. A big hand for Mr. Ghalib Nishtar. Now I would request Mr. Kamal and Amjad Mia, Director Fast Cables Limited, to please come forward and receive his souvenir. Mr. Kamal Amjad Mia. Now I would request Ms. Nadia J. Seth, General Manager Policy and Planning SMEDA, to please come forward and receive her souvenir. A big hand for Ms. Nadia Seth. I would also request Ms. Sonia Seth to please come forward and receive her souvenir. A big hand for Ms. Sonia Seth. She's the Deputy Component Lead Business Enabling Environment at the USAID Small and Medium Enterprise Activity. Thank you very much, Sonia. So thank you very much, Aisha. So the lunch will be now served after the group photo. So please come forward for a candid group photo, all the panelists. If I can also request Mr. Shahid Khan, the Head of Business Development, and Mr. Haroon Ahmed Jan, the Head of Member Affairs, to join us for the group photo. A big hand for all our esteemed thought leaders. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us at this important event today. The lunch will be now served. The floor is open for networking. Thank you very much.